All righty, everyone. Hello, and thank you for being here on this fantastic Friday afternoon for this Exit Planning Concepts for Business Owners workshop. If you don't already know me, I am the Southwest Lane Venture Catalyst with RAIN, and I have the pleasure of serving Cresswell, Cottage Grove, Coburg, Veneta, and Florence communities. So I want you guys to take some time to introduce yourselves in the chat if you don't already know each other's. If you have any questions throughout the session, we will do our best to answer them as soon as possible, but keep in mind that we do have a Q&A with Lonnie at the end, where you're welcome to just throw out questions to him. And I'd like to personally thank Lonnie Woodruff for being with us today. I'm really excited about his presentation and Q&A session, and I know we'll all be able to learn a lot from you. So with that being said, let's get into the session. Welcome, Lonnie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is not a pitch for anything. This is just strictly information to get out in the business community. The business community is like the main passion of mine. Once in a while, I get to carve out some time for mushroom picking, paddleboarding, et cetera, et cetera. But my main passion is helping people in the business community. I'm a business broker by trade, certified exit planning advisor, and there's a lot of information that I think needs to get out there. And that's what today is about, just sharing that information.
Awesome.
So I'll go into, when we go into my presentation now. Ellen?
Oh, do you have the slides on your end?
Yes, I'll get into my presentation now.
I can pull them on my end if you need to. You should have access.
I don't normally present, as you can see, on Zoom.
That's okay.
Just pull up. There you go.
There we go.
I can see. Can everyone else see?
Yeah.
Perfect.
And here we go. So we're just going to do a general overview of the selling and exit planning process. There's many types of exits and transitions. Somebody works on a business for many, many years, sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. And, nobody wants to be in there forever. There's generally hopefully they've thought of an exit plan of how they're going to get rid of it. Either, the most common type is to sell it. There's all types of buyers. There's individual buyers, group buyers, strategic buyers, or you can sell internally, usually to an employee or even a family member, which is different than giving it to your kids. If you want to give your business to your kids, the best thing to do is to talk to your CPA, your financial advisor. There's all sorts of tricks, things you can do, gifting strategies and stuff for efficiency for taxes. Sometimes liquidation is the best option, depending on the goals. All types of sellers have different types of goals. Some want their legacy to go on. Some just care about their nest egg that they worked on for most of their life. Sometimes the liquidation value is far greater than the business value, especially in like equipment intensive businesses. Like if you own an excavation company and you've been buying equipment over the last 20 years for tax strategies, odds are that business has more equipment than they need. So maybe it's a partial liquidation strategy, maybe partial sell. It can get pretty complicated pretty fast, but that's something that you always want to talk about with your CPAs or broker or whoever. Then for your larger businesses, you can do an ESOP, which is employee stock ownership programs, but that's usually for a larger business. That's not too common, but it is an exit strategy. But the selling process is long and hard. It's just there's a lot of preparation that goes into getting a business ready for sale, just like a house or expensive car, travel trailer. You got to get everything looking good and presentable to a buyer. Sometimes you just have a few buyers that are going to be interested and you want to give, lead with your best foot forward. Then you list the business, then you comb through buyers, and there are some specific strategies you want to list discreetly. We'll get more into the selling process and preparation a little in depth here in a few minutes. But then as you list the buyer or list the business, you comb through the buyers, you find a buyer that's interested in the business, then you start negotiating a deal, price and structure. Sometimes structure is more important than price, depending on the seller's tax implications and stuff. And that's some things that sellers don't think about until they're like last minute getting ready to sell. And hopefully they've talked with their CPA well ahead of time. That's something that they should talk with their CPAs now, kind of like their tax consequences for selling their business. If you depreciated your machinery, your buildings, or whatever over time, depreciation recapture has, different tax consequences. And if you can get income over time versus all up front, we'll get more into that as well. Then after you strike a deal, then you go through the due diligence process, which leads into closing. Believe it or not, this is actually sometimes the hardest part. Not always, but sometimes this is the hardest part. Usually involves attorneys on both sides, banks, that kind of stuff. The lending environment right now is, it's a little interesting. We've had huge increases in rates. Just I think as little back as October, SBA rates were 6.5%. Now they're 10.5%. Banks are stress testing for 11 and 12%. And there's talks about rates going up more. Basically, interest rates is just the cost of money. Just think about it that way. Deals that used to cash flow better are not cash flowing as well. Some deals aren't, cash flowing at all. And that doesn't kill deals, but maybe there's more seller carry functions going on. And we have seen that in the market as well. So like if you want the most for your business, then you might want to consider seller carry as part of an option in your strategy of selling. Some main takeaways before you even start is that everything is negotiable. Outside of like a handful of really good laws, everything in the business brokering process or business selling process is negotiable. Price, structure, training, all those things are negotiable. And the number one thing when you're selling your business is discretion is king. You don't want anybody to know your business is for sale, like nobody. And you want to preserve the integrity of the business. Employees, they get nervous. They think the worst person in the world is probably going to buy this business and become the new boss. It sounds bad, but that's not the case. 99% of the time, somebody buys the business because of the employees, not the business. The business is more than just the assets of the name. It's actually the systems and processes of a business. And the employees are most of the time the most important part. So you want to keep it quiet. You don't want your competition to know. If you sell it yourself or go through a broker, make sure you're using non-disclosure agreements, keeping everything confidential all the way to closing. It's exciting times when you get a deal struck and you're getting to the closing table, but still discretion is king. That's sometimes it's hard to do, but it's paramount. You want to make sure nobody knows. And you want to think about structure, not so much price. Now, consider your goals, consider taxes. Like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, seller carry is saving a lot of deals. Seller carry may be your best option too. If you have a lot of real estate or a lot of equipment that's been depreciated, your accountant can probably give you advice on the best deal structure for you to maximize your tax benefit or minimize your taxes. Because if you have a bunch of equipment and it's depreciated out over the years and you sell it all at once, that you might be looking at a heavy tax burden. Just something to consider. Ask your CPA, they're going to know best. And have an idea of options before you market. Just talk with your CPAs, your attorney, broker friends, M&A advisors, whoever, and just have an idea of a few ways that this could go. Whether you find somebody who's going to use SBA financing, somebody who's going to want to sell or carry. Just have a few basic ideas and a flow chart of where this may go before you even list, so that way you're not caught by surprise. Understand the types of financing, SBA versus seller. SBA financing is really nice because the buyer can come in, put a little bit of money down, and you get essentially paid up front. But along with that, there's a lot of restrictions because it is a government-backed program. So there's a lot of things that they want to see as well as far as risk mitigation. They don't like high customer concentration. They don't like high vendor concentration. Like if 60% of your business comes from one customer, they usually frown on that. They'll do a deeper dive. It doesn't necessarily kill a deal or eliminate SBA financing, but they'll just do a deeper dive into things to better understand the business and those risks. And that's something you should consider as a business owner as well. And most importantly, you want to talk to your CPA your attorney, and your landlord before you list. Believe it or not, landlords are a hard part of the process as well. Consider you've owned your business for 20 or 30 years or 10 years or 5 years. You got a great relationship with your landlord. With commercial real estate appreciating so much over the last few years, the last 10 years, you might be grandfathered into a certain lease rate, but your landlord might have a different mindset on this when he hears that the business is going to be for sale. So if you have these conversations ahead of time, you might be paying 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, 5,000, whatever it is, a month rent. And the landlord comes back and says, well, market rates is 10,000. Like this has actually happened quite a bit here in the last few years, is that landlords are like, well, I want market rates. Well, market rates, might add $50,000 to the expenses of this business, which might kill the cash flow. So it's best to have that conversation with your landlord ahead of time, versus when you have a buyer trying to engage and buy a business and this conversation's happening between the three of them. This is stuff that you can help, mitigate up front. I highly recommend you talk to your landlord, your CPA, and your attorney up front. Now, when to start preparing your business? Ideally today, even if but realistically, 1 to 5 years out. But this, I know as a certified exit planning advisor, the little motto from the Exit Planning Institute is that exit planning is just good business planning. Like it really is. The things that you do to get a business ready for sale really just make it easier on the owner and the operator of the business. But there's going to be some resources I'm going to show at the end of this, and you'll see from yourself. But ideally, or realistically, I should say, sorry, you want to start 1 to 5 years out before you're wanting to sell. Like start talking to your CPA, start talking to your attorneys, your landlord, or everything like that well ahead of time, because odds are you're going to need to do some things to your business. And there's no such thing as a perfect business, because a perfect business doesn't need to be sold. You wouldn't want to sell a perfect business because it would just create cash flow. You just collect as you go on into retirement age, drinking Mai Tais on a beach somewhere. But that's, as business owners, we know that that's not the case. All businesses have some opportunity areas, but there's some major things that are pretty consistent in all businesses. The books are usually a little bit lacking in cleanliness, and the way you operate a business versus the way you want to operate a business to sell might be different. Maybe you're working on a tax minimization strategy. You and your accountant are working as much as possible to find every, trick and strategy, everything you can to minimize your tax liability. Well, when you go to sell your business, you really want to maximize your profits of the business to show what that business can do profit-wise, because that's what a bank's going to lend on, and that's what buyers really care about. At the end of the day, 99% of these business transactions are a financial decision. There's emotion involved, and it's emotional on both sides. Like sometimes my job feels like I'm 20% counselor, and that's because it's a very emotional process. But most importantly, a buyer is going to be looking at your business to see if they can provide for themselves, their family, their long-term goals, and they know that they're going into this for their own 10, 20, 30-year plan. And it's got to work for them. It's got to, we call it the sanity test or the pencil test. And you might be hiding the profit by buying equipment, depreciating it, et cetera, et cetera. But ideally, you want to work with your CPA in your few years up to selling to maximize the profits. And you want to document your systems and processes. This is very, very important. So you really want to think about a business as a transferable asset like anything else. It's like selling a car, but a lot harder. So like you would give full value for a car up front because you take the keys and drive away. So when you're selling a business, imagine that some of those car parts are in boxes. So that, the buyer might be like, well, I'll give you half the value up front, then half the value once I realize that all the pieces are in the boxes and I put it together. So that's sometimes where structure fixes things, but you want to document your systems and processes ahead of time. So that way a buyer can see that like, hey, this is how I operate our business. These are the flows of the customers, the sales channels, all that stuff. They don't even have to be in depth, but you just want some documentation of like, hey, our employees have job descriptions, our customers are this. You want to have some sort of basis of like a buyer understanding how they can get into your business and replace you, but you're the expert in your business. So they got to be comfortable in replacing your shoes. So that's that you got to be able to make a buyer feel comfortable about that. Brand and reputation issues, sometimes all businesses make mistakes on a long enough timeline. You want to clear up and clean up any brand and reputation issues, because that could be, you might have a potential buyer that, they like your business on paper, then they signed an NDA, then they realize the brand, they look at some Google reviews, and they're like, hey, what's going on here? And, this has happened. We've had some pretty big, businesses, and, they had to clean up their reputation before we could sell them. Customer and vendor concentration, that's some issues that some potential buyers have, concerns about, along with banks. If 90% of your revenue come from a certain customer, or 90% of your products come from a certain vendor, that could be a liability. That's sometimes there's no way around that. Like if you're a home builder, then 90 or 60% of your stuff comes from just a few suppliers, but those suppliers are big name brand box stores in the home building material supply chain. Like no problem, right? It just takes a little bit more analysis. Key employees and management, this is a big one. A lot of owner operator businesses, the owners do a little bit of everything, or a lot of everything, or just plain everything. And that's really scary for somebody who's looking to buy a business. That if as an owner operator, if you're working 60 hours a week, pretty much any buyer looking at this business, I think I'm pretty talented, but a lot of these businesses that I'm looking at and talk to have just really robust people working 60 hours a week. It would take me 90 or 100 hours a week to do what they do. So what I would do is start scaling yourself out of the business, promote employees, get key employees, set up some sort of management structure. And even if it's just, let's just say you do this a year before you sell, as long as you have a manager or two or lead employees or whatever, taking off some of that workload, and they just got a 6 month or a year head start for when a buyer comes in, that usually fixes it. And these are just a bunch of these things that you want to do long before you list, because sometimes when you list a business and you're working on these things while talking to buyers and running your business, it can overload a seller. So these are these things, these are like little projects you can do well in advance. We're all owners, we're all work really hard, and but we can't work a million hours a week. So if you work on these things a little bit now over time, you get your business really ready for sale, and it increases your chances of selling. So listing the business, once again, whether you use a broker or you want to sell it yourself, there's a lot of people out there that do really well just selling the business themselves, or they know who they want to sell it to already. But again, just keep it discreet. I hear about businesses for sale that are in contract all the time, just because of my circles I'm in with financial advisors and stuff, and just out there in the business community. And like, that's not good. That's not good. I wouldn't want anybody to know about my transactions. So just careful who you talk to, and ideally you don't want to talk to anybody. I mean, talk to your spouses, your CPAs, and your attorneys and stuff, because they're bound by confidentiality. But don't tell Bob the barber or anybody else. Is information like this spreads fast, and it can be very damaging to a business. Your employees, like I said before, they get uneasy, they leave, or I've seen many times where they'll leverage, hey, I know you're going to sell this business and you need me, so I want $5 an hour raise. And you're like, well, I guess I have to, because I need you. You're right. You avoid a lot of the stuff if you just keep it confidential. Your customers, they can lose confidence. Like if it's, a construction business, how are they going to warranty the work? And these are unfounded fears, but they're fears nonetheless. We're all human. So customer going into a business that has a big for sale sign on it, they're going to be like, well, is this person going to warranty the floor I'm going to have them installed, or they're going to warranty whatever I'm going to buy, right? Whatever service or product, your competition. If you're in a competitive environment like construction or anything really, if your competition knows you're for sale, they're going to use that against you. You go up to bid against another person, and your competitor's for sale, and everybody else does too. When you go to that customer for a bid, you're going to be like, well, how are they going to warranty their work? they're for sale. What's that going to look like? And to just plant that seed of fear, and you're going to start pulling apart their business. So yeah, just keep it discreet. And another important takeaway is a lot of people talk like they want to buy businesses. They talk like they want to be their own boss, but just like anything else, selling a car, if anybody's sold a car on Craigslist or Facebook or whatever, you got your tire kickers. Like I will tell you that active buyers don't waste time. Active buyers act, and they move fast, and they will do what they need to do to get the process facilitated. Believe it or not, it's actually the sellers that get cold feet, not the buyers. Usually a buyer makes a decision. They've ran through their own financial analysis and committed in their head that they're ready to go. But the sellers, and I have conversations with the sellers ahead of time, but they're the ones that get cold feet. They start thinking about, what am I going to do after I sell this thing, after I train, after I sell this thing? And that's something that also you want to think about ahead of time. Like because I've had that happen to me as well. Like sellers get, they wonder what they're going to do for their final chapters of their life when they retire, where their business is their blood, sweat, and tears for the last 20, 30, 40 years. What are they going to do? Their kids are out of the house. They're going to retire and drink Mai Tais on the beach or go mountain biking, whatever they're going to do. Some people are like, well, sometimes they just have to do that mental process to think about it. And it's best to do it ahead of time. So negotiating a deal. So there's almost an infinite amount of ways that a deal can be structured. And sometimes the structure of a deal will save a deal or create a deal or make a deal. It's more important than price sometimes. And that comes down to both sides. You might have a buyer that has a certain amount of resources or a way that the deal works for them. Then you have the seller that has their goals, and after they talk to their CPA, it might work for them, and you just kind of negotiate it out. Sometimes it's cash up front, sometimes it's half cash, sometimes it's 40% cash, sometimes it's SBA financing, sometimes somebody uses a retirement account as a rollover business startup. It's almost infinite. I've seen some pretty creative deal structures. I've helped create some creative deal structures to make things happen for a willing seller and a willing buyer. That's it's a lot of fun what I do. Then after you get into, once you get the deal negotiated, you go into due diligence, and this is a period of time where a buyer gets to explore everything. They get to see all the financial records, access to QuickBooks. Sometimes they ask for bank statements. Sometimes they ask for anything and everything. Generally, the things that are off limits, 99% of the time, is customer lists are off limits and meeting the employees are off limits, because that's, once again, that poses risk to the seller of the business when the deal isn't done. Those kind of introductions and that kind of information is usually available after the sale. Basically, after the buyers purchase the business, it's theirs now, and of course they get access to everything. It helps prevent, the loss of integrity of the business. So it's important to keep these things straight. And when you're running a business and doing a deal, same time, sometimes it's things get lost, balls get dropped, but you want to make sure that there's a few of these things you don't make mistakes on. If you give a buyer your customer list and they decide they don't want to buy the business, they have the customer list. That's probably not a good thing. So something you want to really avoid. Due diligence. Again, this can be, not always, but this can be the hardest part. It's again, it's the financial review, the legal review. You have attorneys and accountants on both sides most of the time. The landlord talks. This can happen at due diligence, or sometimes these conversations go on past due diligence, and as long as they're done by closing, sometimes they go on past closing if you feel good about the conversation. But yeah, this is the hardest process. Usually, if there's SBA financing involved, The SBA kind of drives the bus, so to speak. They tell us all the financial documents and the reviews that they want. Every bank's a little bit different as well. You have kind of your SBA guidelines. You have the bank guidelines on top of that, which vary per bank. That's called overlay. And that varies, again, bank by bank, depending on their credit portfolio, on the bank's appetite, even down to the personalities of their chief lending officers. I've kind of seen everything. There's multiple banks out there. What one bank may say no to, other banks may say yes. And if you're selling yourself or whatever, selling the business yourself, I recommend you talk to many banks. Just because a couple banks said no, I encourage you to try other banks to say yes to pre-qualify your business for sale. Because odds are if you got a cash flowing business, there's somebody out there that's going to want your loan. Then you close and celebrate. Then, of course, after you close and celebrate, there's usually some training involved for the owner, for the new owner and the old owner. Do a little bit deeper dive into preparing a business. Again, business is just an asset. It's like selling a car, but it's a lot harder than selling a car. You give the money up front, drive the car away. Then once again, like what if part of the car was in boxes? That's pretty hard to sell a car in boxes, even like a 67 Camaro or 66 Ford Bronco, sitting there looking pretty in the driveway is probably worth 50, 60 grand or more. I don't know those kind of cars, but sitting in boxes, it's worth a lot less because you got to pay a mechanic to put together for one, but and the buyer's not even certain all the parts are there. Again, 1 to 5 years from your selling target, work on this. And a good concept to think of is that when you're selling anything else, think about outside in. What does my business look like? What does my value proposition look like to a buyer? What would I think as a buyer looking at my business? And that's a lot of conversations that I have with sellers, is that whether it's price, whether it's the value of their business, I just sometimes have them reflect on that. Like, well, what would you think about if a stranger walked up about your business? What would you think about you looking at your business, knowing, like, okay, you own a plumbing company. How would you think about this plumbing company? And they, depending on their answers, can kind of help formulate what their plan is as they go to market. And there's no such thing as a perfect business. Perfect business will not have to be sold. Or if you do want to sell it, let me know. I'll probably buy it. There's tons of resources out there. You can hire coaches. You can talk to your CPAs. If you have 1 to 5 years to work on things, that's a long timeline, but it does go fast because you're busy, but it does go fast. You want to be very deliberate in this. And I'm going to share a couple books. I got no financial interest in the sale of these books. Again, this isn't a pitch about anything about me or Transworld. This is just getting information out there in the business community. Your books, clean, understandable, accurate. This is very, very, very important. If your books are not accurate and you get a deal negotiated and there's financing involved, or in the due diligence process, we find out the books are wrong, or the buyer finds out the books are wrong or inaccurate, or, and 99% of the time it's just a mistake. They're just not accurate because the owner's just too busy. The bookkeeping's not up to date. Yeah, it can kill deals. Things that come later in the due diligence process that look like they're oversight or mistakes really kill deals. It breaks the trust of the buyer, and sometimes that kills the deal completely. Then you got to start from scratch. Then you got to clean up your books and start from scratch. And again, the way that you run a business and the way that you want to run a business to sell might be a little bit different on tax strategy. So, the final few years before you want to sell, you want to quit hiding all the profit. All those tax minimizing strategies that you and your accountant are being clever about, creative, you probably want to stop doing that and just think of, you want to maximize the profit, because that's what banks lend on and that's what buyers care about. So you'll get more for your business if you're showing maximum cash flow that the business can do. That doesn't mean overstate or go the other way in your bookkeeping. You want to be accurate and legal and all that stuff, but you want to show what the business can run on all cylinders. And that could even be the final 2 years. We've listed some businesses that we've had these conversations, or if you want to sell your business yourself and do this, that's great. Just hit the throttle on the business and show what we can do. And that's because that's what a buyer really cares about. If you do have excess equipment, like if you're excavation business, painting, whatever, if you've acquired equipment over time, because that's part of your tax strategy, you probably want to sell off some of that stuff because it isn't going to be able to go with the business anyways. Some of these businesses acquire more equipment than the business can afford. It comes down to a cash flow problem. Let's say that you've acquired $1 million worth of equipment, $500,000. It doesn't really matter. It matters in comparison to the cash flow. Let's say you got $1 million worth of equipment and your business cash flows 100 grand a year. Basically, $1 million loan would be about $100,000 a year. So that business, if you were trying to sell it, wouldn't cash flow. But if you sold off half of it, and you only need half of it, you probably want to sell off the other half, liquidate it, sell it for as much as you can. Then you just want to sell the business for the minimum needs, plus maybe a few extra pieces of equipment, in just in case something breaks down. And document your systems and processes. This is something that I can't emphasize this enough. You are the expert in your business. Your employees are the expert in their roles. But for somebody who's going to be looking at your business, they don't know anything about your business. So they're going to need to easily transition into those roles, i.e. the owner's role, and know what everybody does. If there's no formal job descriptions, there's no systems and processes, they're not going to know anything, which means if they can't even review it and have an idea before they make an offer, they may not even make an offer. Like if you got 15 employees and they can't figure out who does what, even though that they all do amazing things, like they may not make an offer because I can't, it's going to take me a year to figure out what people do. But if you get ahead of that and have documented systems and processes, that only helps you. Key employees and management. So even if you're just a one-person shop doing a lot of work, you probably want to scale your business up a little bit, or even hire an assistant. Or if you have 2-3 employees, one of them's really good and really savvy, maybe they want to be a lead employee. Maybe they take a little bit off the owner's plate. This kind of goes back to the exit planning is just good business planning, is that some of these things that you do actually make it easier to run your business. And sometimes you can even run your business longer when you're getting tired of the same business and you do a few of these things, you actually can stay in your business longer because you're not as tired. Trust is a hard thing. I know it's hard to let go of some things, but you really got to. Some things are just not that important. Some things are really important. Like you probably want to stay on top of your payroll, probably in doing these other things. But I've seen owners driving around customers. I've seen owners doing this stuff. Like, well, come on, outsource that. I know you got employees that can do this. Some of these things that you don't need to convince a buyer that they need to do this stuff. They need to be working on the business and not in the business so much. And that's kind of a concept to think about too, is that as an owner, am I working in the business or am I working on the business? And you want to be transition yourself to a position where you're working on the business more than you are in the business. And absentee businesses where you're only working on the business that's hard. Like that's not a reasonable expectation. But the more that you scale out, the more easy it is for somebody to replace you, and the more that they're going to be willing to pay for your business, or the more likely your business is to sell, because that's appealing. If they got to come in and do everything as well, that's a hard ask, and maybe they don't want to pay that much for it. But if it's easy for them to get in there and take on the roles, then they're more likely to buy it and maybe more likely to give you more money for it. It's the two key components to this whole process. Is you got to find a willing buyer and an able buyer, and take it all the way to the finish line. So there's kind of our CEO wrote in a book one time and said, what's a business worth? Well, technically a business is worth what somebody's willing to make an offer on and go through due diligence and all the way to the closing table, willing to pay you for it. There's each industry has multiples, rules of thumb, but in general, that's the common sense approach to all of this, is that your business has to be appealing to somebody who wants to pay you for your business and replace you. And all this stuff is just kind of all about that. And I expect this is just going to create more questions, a lot more follow-up. I even tell my clients, my prospective listing clients, that like it may take 2, 3, 4 conversations to get a full view of the landscape to see what this whole process is like before you even make a decision if right now is the time to sell, or you got to work on some things. Some things you want to work on ahead of time. But so, and you want to be honest about your business too. What you can fix in your business, what's okay, and what you're willing to talk about. I found it's best to talk about the areas of opportunity in your business ahead of time. Say, hey, like this is a great business. Here's a couple of the things that are of concern. Are you okay with these concerns? Because if you try to hide those concerns and they find out later in the process, they're like, well, I feel like the seller was trying to hide that. What else are they trying to hide? And it just breaks trust. So it's just be honest. Be like, hey, I got a really good business. 90% of my revenue comes from one customer. But this customer and I have had a relationship for 20 years. They know that I'm possibly selling. I'll do introductions and stuff like that. Are you okay with that, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer? If they are, well then great. If they're not, then you move on to the next buyer. Some people just have mental hurdles they can't get over. And you want to efficiently talk about those things because some people have different, risk tolerances or mental, hurdles that they can't get over, whatever you want to call it. But it's just best to be honest about it because no matter what, those skeletons come out of the closet. It's better just to talk about them ahead of time. Yeah. And know your business from an outsider's perspective. Like, your business from the inside. As an owner, you know everything. You know what paint's faded on what truck, all that stuff. But you want to think about your business from a buyer and talk about your business about opportunities, concerns, good things, bad things, great things, what they would do if they were 30 and buying this, or 40 and buying this, you want to be able to have a range of conversations and just be honest about it, because odds are whoever's looking to buy a business is going to be excited and passionate about it and know that they're going to have, payments for a long time, and they got to make it work. So they're willing to make it work. So just when you're preparing your business, just get ready for those types of conversations. The 2 books I want to talk about are Walking to Destiny by Chris Snyder and Getting the Most for Selling Your Business. This is by Jessica Fialkovich. She owns 2 large trans world agencies here in the U.S. This is a great book. This is by the president of the Exit Planning Institute. These are huge resources. Every business owner should read these. This, as a business owner, these books will make your life easier now. Not just when you go to plan to sell, but they'll make your life easier now. Sometimes they talk about large businesses, multiple employees, that kind of stuff. Just think about it as concepts. Like when they talk about, scaling up key employees, like that doesn't mean you have to have a rigid management structure, but, everybody's like defined in their roles. It just means that you want to have some of your employees working on some of the things. And when they talk about cleaning up your brand and reputation, it doesn't mean 1 million 5-star Google reviews. It just means that the negative reviews are addressed and the company has a decently healthy image. That's all it's saying. And just think about it in terms of concepts. And exit planning is just good business. So just start today. I really recommend you start today. These books will make your life easier. So that was a lot of information. I open up the floor to anybody and everybody. And as your juices are going, just ask away.
Hey, Lonnie, this is Jim Gilroy at Banner Bank, and I really think you did a great job. This is excellent. And
Thank you.
well, and I deal with a lot of the people that you're talking about, both before and after. And I'm going to keep this as a resource for me to share with them. But would you do me a favor? And you may have said something earlier and I missed it, but would you talk about your business, Trans World, and your part in it, your background, more so that we get a sense about who you are and the type of capability people like you have?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. No problem. I work for Transworld Business Advisors. We're a business brokerage firm. We're one of the largest. We are the largest in the country and in the world. Um, we're bigger than our next 6 competitors combined, but that just means that we got a lot of resources. Our office is actually, we're a franchise model. Our office is actually owned by people that live here in Oregon, and I love it. My background before this, I've been doing this. This is year 4 for me for Transworld. I did a little bit of this, buying and selling of businesses. I worked for a big food company, and I used to buy and sell as part of my role these food territories. And before that, I was a food sales rep, and that's how I did pretty decent. That's how I got headhunted for that. Then before that, I was a financial analyst for a bank and a credit union. Actually, the bank you work for. A long time ago in the main office in Walla Walla.
Oh,
And then-
yeah, good for you. That's good to know. Well, I mean, it speaks highly of Banner to have someone like you in the position you're in.
Yeah, I think my time at Banner really helped form my skill set here. I've just I did it. It wasn't by design, but I've done a few things over the last 20 years that feel like makes me pretty good at this. My first real job out of high school was Les Schwab. I worked there full time. I went to Oregon full time, and what an amazing foundation about business principles and how you treat people, how you treat customers, how you treat employees, and how you build and scale a business. Like it's just was just wonderful. Then went into banking, learned a lot about profitability analysis. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
yeah.
Um, okay, I know you said it widely varies, but like how long is the average buy or sell process? would you say?
Buy or sell process. So we have Transworld stats that say, and national stats for all businesses in all states is 8.4 months. So it can be a long process. Yep. So some businesses sell a lot faster than others.
Mhm.
Some businesses don't sell at all. There's certain industries that are hotter than others, and it depends on your business. When you go to market, is your business ready for sale? If it's ready for sale and priced right, you'll probably sell it. If it's not, you may not sell it at all. Another terrible national stat, but it's kind of sobering at the same time, is that the national database shows that 1 out of 5 businesses that are listed actually sell. The other ones either liquidate or they give away or whatever. So that's pretty crazy. So if you're a business owner, you probably want to have your business, as ready as possible when you go to market. There's some things, again, no business is perfect, and buyers are expecting that they're going to go in there and add their flavor to things or do things a little bit differently. A lot of businesses need updating. That's a huge theme right now, is that these businesses that have been around for 20 years or longer don't have social media presence. They don't have Google reviews, and some of these sellers who have great businesses never learned nor care to learn about these, and just adding that to the business actually elevates it immediately.
Okay, my other question, which is also a very big question, is like, how do you determine the financial worth of a business, or what determines kind of the financial worth? If a business owner is like deciding, let's say they want to pivot into something else, they don't want to run their business, but they're trying to decide between staying, like basically handing over the CEO role to someone else and still like owning it, or they want to sell and they're trying to determine like what makes sense, like what would they even look at?
Well, I think I hear 2 questions. You mean, how do you value a business? Then how does
Yeah.
somebody determine if they want to sell their business or hire out their role than just keep the business?
More so the first one, in terms of assuming it was a purely financial decision as to whether they were staying in or going out.
Great question. Yeah, part of every listing process is coming up with the value of the business. And 9 times out of 10, we use what's called the income approach. So we take 3 years of taxes, a current P&L and balance sheet, then we do what's called a recast. We have some spreadsheets, and we take the net profit of the business and add back depreciation, amortization, taxes on the P&L, and we just try to find the total cash flow of the business. Sometimes these businesses have a lot of like owner benefit or discretionary expenses that are run through this business. Technically, they're the cash flow. Like if grandma and daughter and son have cell phones ran through the business, extra car payments, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Technically, anything that a new owner wouldn't do because he's not going to pay your grandma's cell phone payment, we can add that back as cash flow because technically that's cash that the business is discretionarily spending.
Mhm.
And then we come up with a number over the last few years. Sometimes we average it, sometimes we don't. Then we use that number times a multiple. And that multiple is mostly determined by the industry it's in and other factors. Like, let's say construction's 1.5 to 2.5 times on average.
Mhm.
If you have a really big, really robust construction business that's absentee levels of management, great branding, all that stuff puts this upward pressure in price. If you got brand reputation issues, no management structure, puts downward pressure on the multiple.
Mhm.
And the other approach, the other, say, 1 or 2 times out of 10 is called the asset approach. Is just basically we add up the fair market value of the assets. That should be less than what the business is worth from the income approach. If we think about it technically, or from a banking perspective, that if your assets of your business collectively are worth more than what the business makes, this can be considered an inefficient use of assets. So most common is that the business has probably had a tax strategy over the last 10 years buying equipment to minimize taxes. They bought an extra dump truck or excavator or something like that. I highly recommend they sell that off before then. But yeah, those are the two approaches.
Thanks.
I have a question, but I don't know if my audio is working.
I hear you.
Okay, good. I find that having developed my supplier list is one of the biggest assets of my business. And as I've entered into some discussions about selling my business, the buyers want to know my suppliers. And it's something that I find not easy to share with them, especially early on in the process. And I wonder, when you say that you have to discuss the business with the potential buyer and with the bankers, how one can do that without really revealing one's suppliers, that it took years to develop a supplier list.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that I just wonder whether it's standard operating procedure to let people know what who your suppliers are. That's a very valuable information, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think there's some important questions to that. If they do find out who your suppliers are and can take business away from you without buying your business, I wouldn't tell them. But obviously, I'd find out how serious your buyer is. Maybe there's some legal documents you can have worked out between a couple attorneys that they can't use this information ever, kind of thing. That might be a great attorney question, because depending on the nature of that, specific supplier information we sometimes keep secret. Like if it's a handshake relationship. Like there was a concrete business that I helped sell that had a very specific sand supplier that was very private, and it was an individual that owned the property, and we kept it quiet until closing because we were afraid that maybe the sand supplier would be a little shaky about it, and there was no worry about the buyer using any information to the detriment of the seller, but we were afraid that the supplier might be a little iffy about the situation. So we waited till closing for the introduction, and it worked good. The seller was sure that the relationship would maintain, and it did. So we could actually talk one-on-one about that, about your specific situation, but
So Lonnie, just to follow up on what you're saying, we'll talk about NDAs, because that seems to be the going thing in any process like this. And how does Barbara's question fit in with that?
Well, NDAs are standard practice for us. Like in fact, we have two gates to entry before we give up business information. Even the name is that a buyer has to sign a non-disclosure agreement and they got to fill out a buyer profile. That's two ways that we qualify a buyer. If they're not willing to sign an NDA, like, well, I'm not willing to show them business stuff. If they're not willing to fill out a buyer profile, I'm not showing them any business stuff. In an NDA, even an NDA doesn't prevent. It helps prevent risk, but it doesn't eliminate it. If you're talking with a buyer that can or will likely use information to circumvent the seller, if it's easy, then even with an NDA, I probably wouldn't share some information like customer lists. We almost never give those till after closing, like no matter what. Like we just not information we give. Like this, do you want the email lists and customer information out of a CRM? That's just too bad. Some circumstances we do because it won't pose risk to the business. But yeah, that's a rare thing. And introduction to the employees, we rarely do that too. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 times do we actually do introductions to the employees. Did that answer your question, Barbara?
Yeah, I have had problems with NDA, non-circumvention, all kinds of different contracts like that, where they basically just blew me off and did what they were going to do anyway because they knew I wasn't going to have the resources to take them to court. And so the whole process of selling is a lot of work, and I just don't know how to protect myself through, and the business, really the business is what I'm talking about, protect that through the process. Even changing down to getting managers to deal with the customers has affected customer confidence.
Well, we could talk one-on-one. There's some really good business coaches in town that can help scale businesses, help with business, just even the individual facets of a business. There's a wealth of resources here in this valley, from marketing to accounting to, employee retention management, business structure, that kind of stuff. There's probably some systems and processes that can be implemented and help with this. Maybe not all the headache can go away, but maybe most of it.
Thanks. Where would you start to look for something like that, other than Rain or Score?
Well, Rain would be a good one.
Yeah.
It'd be a really good one. Yeah, we could do a meeting all together and just kind of figure out a little bit more, then get you, helped in the right direction.
Good. Thanks.
That would be a good idea. I think Barbara, you, I, maybe Heather and Lonnie could set up something one-on-one. If you could send me an email, that would be, get that
Yes.
scheduled.
Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, because at the end of the day, this the main reason why I do this is just to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you, Lonnie.
Thank you.
If
Fire away.
Barbara's done, I have a question for you. So you mentioned that there's hot industries that are selling. What are those specific hot industries?
Well, thanks to like Grant Cardone and like Cody Sanchez, laundromats, vending routes, that kind of stuff. Self car wash, those absentee type businesses. And all industries, if they're close to absentee, like if you got a strong cash flowing business that's absentee with lots of employees and branding and stuff like that, it's very sellable. And there's a lot of activity going on. Like there's a lot of people that are buying the stuff. We have it's a different buyer than people that are buying real estate. People that buy businesses are a little bit more active participants versus passive participants. Like the person that's going to buy shopping centers is going to be a different person that's going to buy businesses. Maybe the person that buys businesses is going to also own shopping centers or whatever for passive income, but usually they're bored. Maybe they created wealth or something that they've sold off a business, then they'll go drink Mai Tais for like 4 months, and then realize that like what makes them whole and happy, makes their heart feel warm and full, is the running a business and building something, or it's providing jobs. A lot of people that buy businesses just want to create jobs.
So I have, thank you for that. But I have another question just about restaurants. There's a lot of restaurant owners or people in the food industry that I work with. What are some tips that could specifically help restaurant owners sell their businesses?
Restaurants, yeah, that's one of those harder spaces. It's not impossible because it's a lot of people want to own restaurants, but maybe somebody's dream's a little bit different than yours. Maybe the pizza restaurant you own, you want to sell to your employee or something like that, then they have a different idea in pizza. Not a completely different one, but might be a little bit different. Restaurants tend to be one of those businesses where maybe cash disappears, maybe they have a different tax strategy, to say it nicely. So conventional financing is hard, SBA financing is hard. There are other great lenders out there. SBDC can get you some financing, Business Oregon, Craft 3, to kind of see what your business is worth. I mean, if you're a seller and thinking about selling your business, like maybe just talk to a lender and see what your business is worth on paper as far as what a loan is. Because if a bank will say, hey, yeah, we can sell your restaurant for $200,000, maybe that's a good price that'll work for you. If not, maybe the bank will say like, well, you need to have more cash flow or something. Then you go about extending your hours or whatever. But to answer you directly, a restaurant is just like any other business. You want to make sure the business makes enough money that somebody can survive and make payments. So like if your restaurant does really well, or let's say it doesn't do well, let's say your restaurant makes 30-40 grand a year, let's say that can be a comfortable living. But if you want to sell your restaurant for $200,000, then you have $20,000 in debt service. That's not the number, I'm just pulling something out of the sky. But now that $40,000 a year goes down to 20, well, that makes a harder pill to swallow when somebody wants to buy your business, because they're going to be living off 20 grand a year. They're either going to have to scrape by, live in the restaurant, have another job or something like that. So it's got to survive the pencil test.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you, Lonnie.
Of course.
Would you say that the primary motivation for buyers is to look at it as like an investment in a way to increase their earnings, or would you say that there's more personal vocational motivations for buyers? Like they want a healthy cash flow, but they really want like a business that they can work in and do a particular kind of work.
It's both. It's both. I encourage buyers to find something they're going to be passionate about, because no matter what, owning a business is, as we all know, is a series of headaches, and they're nonstop. And but at the end of the day, you still have to survive. And it's not necessarily like how wealthy I can get or like how much money I can get. That can be a component, but mostly it's, am I going to make enough money to provide for my family and pursue my passion? And it's kind of a twofold thing. That really is. You can be really passionate about a certain industry, but if you buy a business and it doesn't cash flow and you can't pay your bills, well, you're going to have to get a job or something like that. So conversely too, if you get into a business you're not passionate about, like if you get into construction and you don't like construction, that the business is going to suffer, then you're going to have to sell it and do something else as well. So like it's kind of a twofold thing.
So the profile is kind of someone looking for a particular kind of work, but in a way that isn't going to require them to suffer to get there, basically.
Well, define suffering. Owning a business is always suffering a little bit.
Financially, at least. Like
yeah, but not financially. Yeah, but it's you want to be able to make it. or you have to be able to make it. You can't pay your bills, you get kicked out of your house. I mean, you know, that's a strong financial incentive to make sure that the business you choose is going to provide for the living you need to make, not just you want to make. You know, we're not talking about yachts. We're talking the opposite. We're talking about, am I going to maintain my housing? You know, some of these businesses, if they're priced too much, they won't sell, because if I buy this business, I'm going to make not enough money to cash flow my life expenses, you know, and that varies per buyer. Like, you might have a buyer with kids,
Right.
or no kids. You might have a buyer with 6 kids, you might have a buyer with 2 kids, you might have a buyer with no kids, and that varies on buyer per buyer. And, you know, and that's why, like, it only takes one buyer to sell your business. You're not trying to sell it to 50 people in the world. You just got to find that one person, or a group of people or a group of suitors, so to speak, that would be good for your business and it makes sense for them.
Mhm.
Great question.
Anyone else have any questions? Lonnie, how can people get a hold of you after this if they'd like to connect?
I'll put my email in the chat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking the best thing to do is, as we get this out, is maybe have a lot of the questions funnel through you, and then we can do some public responses or something like that. And just kind of the nature of just showing information. Because again, this isn't so much a plug for me at all. It's just to get information out there. And I think we can all share this and make this, you know, common knowledge and shareable for everybody in the business community. Because I think this information needs to get out there. There's a lot of people retiring out of businesses, a lot of businesses going up for sale. And I hear about businesses going out of business without even talking to a broker or something like that. Like, why did some of these businesses go out of business? Is, you know, like, I think this information needs to get out there. Maybe it was for sale, nobody knew. Maybe they didn't know how to sell it, you know. And that's, you know, we can go follow this up with some good resources. If you do want to sell your business on your own, there's biz buy sell. You know, you can list your own ad. You can sell your business without a broker, you know. And there's a lot of sellers. I mean, I have immense respect for business owners. They're scrappy, savvy, smart, clever, and they can navigate the sales process without a broker, you know.
Would you be able to drop your email in the chat, Lonnie?
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome. I really enjoyed your presentation and I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. Thanks, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I will be saving this recording and hopefully we can make it to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So I look forward to chatting with you all further. If anyone has questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me as well. Or Heather. Heather is here as well. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the
Thank
for now.